Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Accelerate stage at IBTM 2022. Joining me this morning is Max Gethin. We're talking about some really interesting things that are happening right now in the events industry. Before we get into that conversation with Max, there is a slight amount of housekeeping. First of all, thank you personally to the team at ACS that are going to make us sound absolutely amazing. We do have a Q&A system, which is run by Slido, which I'm sure you're all aware of or maybe have used in the past. So if you want to ask myself or Max any questions through the session, feel free to do that. I've got them on my iPad here, so I can start to incorporate those into the conversation as it happens. Don't feel like you have to wait till the end. If you want to use that, there is a QR code hopefully behind me that you can scan. The code is #IBTM22, and just make sure you select the Accelerate stage so that those questions come through to us. So Max, welcome to the Accelerate stage.
Thank you very much.
To get us started, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your position in the industry, and what you kind of get up to?
Fab. So I'm Max Gethin. I'm Client Development Lead at Wonder, who are a B2B and B2E specialist agency. We sit within a collective of agencies which include Amplify, who are a global creative agency specialising in culture and experiences, and then Seed, who are our student and Gen Z specialists. So between us, we've kind of got a good view of everything that's going from B2B, C-suite decision makers, right the way through to consumers and everyone coming up from Gen Z.
And what in your role, because we're here to talk about tech, so what about in tech in your role do you find really exciting at the moment?
So from my side, and I think what's really interesting coming back into the industry after obviously almost 2 years of virtual, particularly my role, I work very closely with our strategy and creative teams. So when we're working on pitches and projects, it's really aligning what both the audience want with the business objectives and the brand goals, and then making that into a bloody good experience that people want to attend. So I think as we've come into kind of 2022, and we're actually looking at kind of trends for this year, and whilst I was writing the kind of questionnaire for the team, I was like, actually, in January, February, we were in this Omicron wave where we were still just gone straight back into lockdown. And, 3-4 months later, we're back delivering massive global conferences just like that. So it's been a really, really interesting kind of few years. Well, this year in particular. And yeah, coming back into that, what we're noticing very much is that human side of interaction, and understanding that our audiences, they've really lacked that face-to-face kind of contact with people. Everyone wants to have the kind of, the kind of face-to-face interaction with product experts, with their peers, with various other people within the industry. So that's the big thing we've been lacking over the last few years.
What's really interesting to me with you, Max, as well, with the types of clients, predominantly technology companies as well, right? With distributed teams, remote teams, very much separated away from each other, but really seeing value in that face-to-face activation with their teams or their customers or prospects as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the best examples we've done this year is with Google Marketing Live. So that typically was a conference in San Francisco. Tens of thousands of people would join for the kind of 3-4 days from across the world. And this year, the event was actually regionalized, so we took it up into, still have the San Francisco hub, where the event was kind of happening for that local market, but then we had 12 different markets across the world, and we were looking after the EMEA region. So that was based in Zurich, nice and easy for people from across the region to arrive. And what we did to kind of almost keep the kind of continuity, the feeling of everybody together, was have that live stream from the San Francisco hub right into all of the events. But what everyone then got was their kind of, I guess, regional expertise. They got the face-to-face time with, a smaller, more intimate crowd where, there's only so many Google staff and product experts you can have, and there's a lot of people who use those products. So making sure that they get the time and effort was absolutely imperative, and we've seen a huge benefit from that, particularly from Google, and that was one of their biggest events kind of coming back from the pandemic. So yeah, really exciting.
It's really interesting to me. We've spoken about lots of different formats over the last couple of years, coming back to in-person. Where does virtual fit? Where does hybrid sit? And it sounds like we're already seeing evidence of multi-hub, multi-spoke events being a really cool way to do that. Just out of interest, what are some of the challenges around producing events in that format? Because do you need a team in every location? Like, how does it work logistically?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with simultaneous events, there's always more team and more people required. I think one of the benefits of that was, we from a logistics perspective, we were delivering just the EMEA hub, which was for about 700 people. So within that, local agencies and local partners could understand their local nuances, the kind of local culture, and understand what that means to that audience. And I think that's the way we apply every project. We start with the audience and understand what do they actually really want from the business and what do they really want from the event. And I think, one of the big things we've noticed is people are less inclined to travel across the world just for 2 days and stay in a hotel, where the blending of personal and work lives through the last kind of 2 years has really meant that people value that personal time. And I think the biggest thing we're kind of going into next year is, particularly in C-suite, is what is going to get them to the event now? What is their real purpose for getting there that they can't get from a piece of content or they can't get from a smaller meeting?
Awesome. You've mentioned already there's obviously post-pandemic there's a desire to reconnect, but have you noticed anything else about the audiences and the way that they've evolved since then? Are they requiring or demanding anything else as part of that event activation?
Well, actually, funnily enough, and we've just done we've interviewed 22 brand side event marketeers over the last couple of months, actually. And what we're noticing going into next year is the purpose around events, and actually is, though very much not a tech side of things, is actually people really want to know that they're contributing something wider than just an event, how it's impacting the local community, how it's impacting the local culture. Obviously, we're under huge pressure as an industry from a sustainability perspective. So what we're trying to do is, one, use kind of more local suppliers to reduce shipping and tracking. We're contributing and donating things to the local community. So things after the events can go to schools, for example. Obviously, there's health and safety and all of that has to go around it, and that's another long talk. But making sure that we are contributing positively to the impact, to the economy, and to local teams.
Is there a word for that then? Because I know many people are talking about like the business leisure aspect. I know there's a couple of people I've met at IBTM that are actually, family members or other things are coming out towards the back end to spend the weekend with them and explore Barcelona. But that's something totally different to that, right? That's more about them being part of the event as a community, or is there a way you're describing that as an agent?
We haven't trademarked anything yet, I have to say, but we're very much aware of it, and I think as an agency we're very much, we know the events industry isn't great for the environment, for example, and we're trying to do absolutely everything we can, and it's a journey, and there's not just a one-size-fits-all solution to sustainability within events. I mean, let's face it, it is still more expensive at times, so it's a balance between budget and purpose, I guess.
But what I take away from that, though, is that there's still a desire for people to engage with the event, but they want to understand what their role is in that. They want to be a participant in that, actually help form the event, but also maybe help to offset their impact or get in other really good positive elements around the event, so that that balance is achieved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's only so much we can do as event organisers. If we're, organising 400 flights, for example, we can look at how we carbon offset that, and a lot of DMCs are being much better at understanding what the carbon footprint is of an event and how they're managing that, so we can work with better suppliers and how we can offset and make sure we're using greener options. But I think it's really exciting. I think what we're seeing now as well is when people are registering for events, we can do those pre-event questionnaires where we look at what actually means to the audience, what do they want from that.
Yeah, interesting bit of information and statistics for everybody in the audience. You can actually have a better impact on your carbon footprint by choosing who you bank with than choosing not to fly to an event or on holiday because of where your money is invested with certain companies and stuff. So that if you're interested in sustainability and what you can do right now, that's something to take a look at, is who do you bank with and where is your money going and what is it funding? And there are some actually carbon neutral and carbon offsetting financial institutions kind of popping up and stuff like that. We've been leveraging tech more with analog formats.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you at Wonder or that you and your clients are using right now in that combination of, in-person events and technology? Because, people want it to be seamless and not necessarily very apparent, but there's still an underlying, maybe it's data collection or other elements of things. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
So I think one, just going on the analog side, and I think one of the big, as you mentioned, we work with a lot of tech companies. So
Google as well, right?
Google one of being our kind of founding client, and one of their big challenges is communicating products to to managers, to product experts, to C-suite, marketing directors, whoever, who really need to. Well, they all have different understandings of the products, but also different needs. Your CMO wants to understand how it's going to affect their business, whereas the people who are actually delivering or working on it day to day, they need to understand how they can use it and how they can keep progressing with it. So what we found from a kind of tech perspective, and particularly around with demos, is that creating demos that, one, speak to various different audiences, but two, take people away from the kind of technology side and actually going back to slightly almost basics, and it becomes a bit more memorable. Everyone's done a VR experience, everyone's done a little demo on an iPad, and actually what we've been doing over the last kind of, I guess, for a while now, but particularly coming out of the pandemic, is using much more analog solutions. So, for example, one of Google's big products is the Performance Max, and that's a various suite of assets which they can use to deliver various different kind of marketing and business solutions. And in order to kind of demonstrate the value of that, we just literally got cogs and put them together and got people to physically turn them, which again, it's much more memorable. It's the kind of active learning way of like, okay, I remember doing that. I don't necessarily remember reading something on an iPad. So what we've been finding is, going almost back to basics and taking people away from the screen and into a kind of more human experience.
Visceral experience. Get my words out.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned there already was, VR.
VR.
And I'm sure many people are kind of delving into now the metaverse and Web3, and I think we should probably explain what those Web3 particularly is. But there are some really good, applicable things happening right now with those technologies as well, right? So I guess let's start with, in your world, what does the metaverse and Web3 actually mean for the events industry?
A good question, and I think, going to define what we actually mean by the metaverse, and the best way I've been able to describe it is it's an interoperable 3D virtual space which is enhanced by VR and AR, and what we haven't got yet is that interoperability, so the ability for one program to speak to another. So you can't go to Accenture's nth floor and do your onboarding and training and then seamlessly jump over to a VR game in Fortnite or whatever. So I think when we're talking about the metaverse, we need to be quite clear in that we're not there yet. It doesn't exist. What we have is a kind of series of microverses where they all have their own currencies, their wallets, their own logins, and they don't speak to each other. Once we do have that, and that's where kind of Web3 comes in, and the best way I've been able to define Web3 is it's essentially the decentralized internet. It's the next iteration where all of the data, the money, is all stored on a decentralized system which is not owned by one big company, for example, like a Google. And I think that gives power back to the users. And once we do get that, and once all these programs start talking to each other, then we're in a really, really exciting place. But as you said, there are some great examples and some exciting ones, particularly in the VR space. And thinking about the audience today and the kind of B2B employee engagement side of things, Accenture's nth floor is a really good example where they they onboarded 150,000 people during lockdown, and instead of being able to go to the office and meet people, they all received a laptop and a VR headset in the post, and then did 2 days of onboarding where they went to events, they socialized, they learned about the company, the business, the values, and all of that. And that's a really exciting and one time efficient way of kind of engaging with people. On the flip side, I don't know if I would personally want to spend my first day in a massive new company in a really exciting role in VR. So I think there's pros and cons, and I think, as we go, and particularly looking at the audience, and we're now starting to see, Gen Z are very much coming into the workplace now. They've all got very different understandings and different needs, and we're quite fortunate to have quite a spread of people within our building, which is, a good couple of hundred people, and you get to see the differences between, the millennials and Gen Zs and how they interact with each other, how the senior team manage as well. So it's really interesting space.
I think we have to understand that some of the adoption of these technologies, the execution around these technologies, has to come with how we as humans also evolve and move on and start to adopt these practices, right? As we become more used to interacting with those technologies, or adopt things at home that allow us to engage with those technology moments, the challenges of delivering that technology drop considerably, don't they?
Yeah, and I'd say, like, if you look at Gen Alpha, who are being born now, they are essentially going to be almost metaverse natives. Like, Gen Z grew up with smartphones in their hands, but who knows, they might be born with a VR set in their hand, on their heads. But I think, tech adoption will always vary depending on where you kind of are in your journey. But I think it's going to be really interesting. For me, I think AR is going to be the most exciting one. I mean, like, imagine if we were on this stage and we could pull up graphs, we could pull up demos, we could personalize a bit of content or data to people in the audience. I think there's so many ways we can leverage it, and that's just in events as well. Like, imagine some of the demos out there. Like, if you pull up an AR screen and you can do a fully immersive, way different experience. So we're scratching the surface of that, and
I have to agree. I think when it comes to AR, it will be ubiquitous within our life.
Yeah.
Because we'll get so used to being able to pull personalized data, or the data that we want right there and right then, whether it's watching the World Cup and seeing player scores and statistics, or maybe pulling up our statistics of the last 5 reviews of our speaking, maybe Max, or something like that. There's just, before we move on just move on a little bit further into other things, the VR activation that you mentioned there, everybody wants to know, can you just kind of throw a ballpark figure out there of a rough cost, and maybe where you think that might get to in the future?
That's a very dangerous question,
Okay.
because it's essentially, how long is a piece of string, really? Like, you can have one small activation where you do one kind of smaller product demo, or, with the Accenture example, they've built an entire campus where they've got various different spaces, and it's not just onboarding and conferences and events, it's very much kind of learning on the job. So teaching people about different products within the business, and giving them tasks and ways of applying their new knowledge. So ballpark is you got to give me a clearer brief than that.
Oh, come on. The cost is high, let's be honest about it. The logistics, the technology itself, to deliver that on scale, at the moment the cost is high. Do you think we'll get to a point where it's so cost effective that it's just accepted as part of the budget, and people will be like, yeah, we want to do even this one small thing as a VR activation as part of this larger event?
Well, VR has been the trend for the next year, for the last 10 years, and it will get better. It will get cheaper. Obviously, Meta have had a couple of hiccups with their latest release, particularly on a price point, but the tech will evolve. We're seeing some really great examples from people working on Unreal, for example, and building new things. And we're even seeing, like, independent designers who will, start contributing to the metaverse, and that's a whole kind of another point where people will be creators within that space. But from a brand side, VR certainly has its pluses, and it does have its uses, but at the same time it is quite isolating. And where it kind of falls down is at an event like this, if you go and sit in a room on your own in a VR headset, you're not going to be able to kind of interact with people in the same way. That being said, I've done some great VR experiences this year. Otherworld, which was one where you kind of go into a pod and you've got a headset and you chat to people and run around doing different games. Or another one was the Sandbox in London, where kind of got 6 of us in a room, and they they make sure you don't walk into the walls or each other. But it was a really fun experience, and I think from an entertainment perspective, but also from a business perspective, once we can get more people involved and more people within that, there's possibilities are limitless.
Okay. In terms of priorities, in terms of those technologies, then, if everybody's time is finite, would you put AR as worth exploring at the top, followed by VR and the metaverse, or would you put them in a different order?
I think that they're all linked, and I think at Event Tech Live when I spoke about the metaverse, and one of the key kind of principles that I gave was, if it's not right for you, your business or brands, don't force it. We're not there yet. There's a lot of tech, and there's a lot of people who are investing. Like, for example, Facebook invested, or Meta now invested 36 billion in just this year alone, and their price or share price has dropped nearly 70%. So they've lost a lot of money in their kind of metaverse journey, and people will capitalize on that research and development and use it in their own way. I mean, second mover advantage is very much a real thing, even third, fourth, fifth mover. So I think there's a lot to play with. I would say AR, though, again, it's not quite there yet. It will be more powerful, particularly for brands, particularly for events where we can use it as in our day-to-day. Essentially, the barrier to entry is much lower. Everyone's got a smartphone. Everyone can use it and pick it up, and you're not, say for example, I wouldn't be able to see you if I put a VR headset on. So yeah, I'd say AR is the kind of key one for us to start watching.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the big tech players like Samsung and Apple and maybe Meta themselves produce in terms of hardware. This is not financial advice, but I think Meta is undervalued at the moment, long term, back to 2015 numbers, so might be worth a few quid if you've got so you're looking for investments. I appreciate we've been talking a lot about what's happening now, which is what people want. They want real world. They want to be able to go away and kind of start exploring things to make it happen in the next year, 2 years, things like that. But what about next year? What about in the future? I just want a little bit of a gaze into your mind. And maybe it's stuff we've not really. Maybe it's more of what we've spoken about already, or maybe there's other things. But what's really exciting you?
I would say, and this comes from having spoken with peers, and the biggest challenge that we're seeing going into next year is budget. And that's not an exciting challenge to be working with. But at the same time, some of our most exciting and most creative projects come from smaller budgets as well. That being said, the budgets are smaller, the costs are higher, labour costs, materials, everything is going up. So, but business objectives and KPIs aren't. So there's going to be a squeeze on the purse strings this year for sure. And it's going to produce some great work, no doubt, but it will limit others, which it's a challenge we're up for facing. But in an ideal world, we can have a bit more fun.
Those things have always been there, though, right?
They have, but there's a few more global issues that I think are impacting this year. So. We'll have to see. I think the other big thing we're having is talent, and we've noticed massively that they're just our biggest challenge as a collective of agencies has been recruitment over the last couple of years, or over the last kind of 6 months, particularly as we kind of came out in that April time where we were. Every brand wanted to go back out to live events, and we just didn't have the team to be able to staff all of the new projects that were coming in. So it was a real challenge in that respect, and we're still looking now. The talent pool is smaller than it used to be. People have left the industry or gone on to different areas, but hopefully that will recover. And I think one thing we were talking about earlier, particularly on that kind of more junior level, where we're looking for people who've got on-site experience, who can deliver events, and people who've kind of had a couple of years of experience or gone into the kind of industry in kind of 2020. They haven't had the opportunities to go and work on live events just because there's been so few of them. So we're trying to balance that with understanding what people's transferable skills are, what other work they've done that is relevant to ours, particularly kind of attitude-wise. So again, a challenge, but one we're working through. And
yeah, my opinion is at the moment, over the next decade, technology skills and those skills around sustainability as well are probably going to be really highly in demand within our sector, because they touch so many aspects of the event business, or absolutely. Internal events, external events, B2B, B2C. What are those key skills though that you're focused on trying to recruit? Because I'm not a technology person myself, so what would I be looking for in order to make sure I'm getting the right talent in to support those technology targets or aspirations that I have within the business?
I think there's kind of two ways of looking at one, the talent, but also the partners you work with. And we as an agency, we really are set up with strategy, creative, production, and project management. Within that, we lean quite heavily on tech suppliers who are able to help us understand what the latest and greatest is, but also from a client perspective. And I think we touched very briefly on data, for example. We're not a data company. We've got a strategy team who can translate insights, but we're not taking massive pools of big data and translating it like a Google would, or even like an AI. And we haven't even touched on AI, but that's a very exciting area to kind of to look at from our side. So
all right, well, to the audience, we do have time for another question. If anybody's not had a chance yet, you can jump on Slido and ask a question. But while anybody does look to do that, AI then, what's most exciting about AI when it comes to an event application to you?
I think from our perspective is really, and it goes back to the audience and understanding what they want from an event, and the way we work, and we often do kind of annual events, and taking the data we capture from that and translating it into actionable business insights, one for the end client and how they can accelerate their business, but two from our side and how we can improve the event and understand what the audience wants, what that means for us, and how we can essentially put on a better event. Continuous improvement is...
I have to agree, it's one area I'm really excited about, because it seems to be we've got so much historical data on our events, speakers, exhibitors, but even more so attendees. Attendees might not necessarily come every single year, but they might interact, and we might have touch points in other means along the way, whether that's be a newsletter, social, other elements. Maybe it's a virtual event, maybe it's a webinar. What really excites me is the ability to maybe start to run simulations on those to kind of predict, how do we get those C-suites back into the show? Or is that big company that used to bring 20, 30 people actually going to show up this year based on the content? So it's less going off gut feeling in history, and actually being able to make business decisions and progress against maybe team members that want to stay with the norm. Well, we've done it this way for the last 5 years, so let's not change things.
Yeah, and I would say that's adding a science to the art of it is very exciting. And I think as an industry, we very much have relied on gut feel for so long. And one of the big things during the pandemic was events was the first thing to go. And from marketing spend, from brand spend, what happens next? And let's face it, events have come back with an absolute bang. But there was a period where I was like, are we going to be massively scrutinized for our ROI and our value? And to be honest, it's still a very much grey area on the true effectiveness of events, but we do know it's going to happen. And I think this is a wider marketing challenge, in the sense that how do we attribute this email campaign, this event, this social ad, this whatever, all of these various different marketing touch points, what attributes that to the final sale or the final person signing up and registering and attending an event? It's that's a big question.
I don't think we should be fearful of being scrutinised or providing that data. It's just about getting it and presenting it in a way that's compelling and makes that business case for the value that we do provide as the events industry. I think that's something we lack at the moment, and actually that's where other sectors like, let's say, online marketing, digital marketing have been able to strengthen their case because they can actually provide that analysis and that reporting. So I think if we get there, then that's just going to make events stronger as a business case to actually
totally agree.
More.
Totally agree.
Well, Max, thank you very much for this morning session. I'm sure Max will hang around for 5 or 10 minutes after the session if anybody wants to grab him personally. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning for this kickoff session.
Thank you very much, everybody.